To start an investigation and say, we're not looking at the parents, means that you aren't actually doing a proper investigation, because you start at ground zero when you do a proper investigation or a proper review. You start with the evidence. You go back to the crime scene. You go back to day one. And you review everything, including the family, because that's what you do. And if nothing else more than to properly eliminate them. But you don't start by saying, we've already eliminated these people as suspects before we even do any work. That, to me, reeks of a plan of action before the investigation even starts.
If a child suddenly vanished during a family holiday, what would be the first instinct? Would it be an immediate call for help, or would a darker impulse take hold, leading to a concealment of the truth? On 3rd of May 2007, in the quiet seaside town of Praia da Luz, one mother's scream shattered the night. They've taken her. But who exactly were they, and what really happened to Madeleine Macan that night? This story is not as simple as it seems. From the outside, the Macan family appeared to embody the epitome of success and stability. Jerry and Kate Macan, both highly regarded in the medical field, were married professionals with well-established careers. Jerry worked as a consultant cardiologist, a role demanding extensive training and dedication, while Kate, a general practitioner, brought the same expertise and compassion to her work. Together, they had secured positions of respect and financial security, affording them a comfortable lifestyle.
They were raising 3 children: Madeleine, their eldest daughter, who was just 3 years old at the time, and their twins, Sean and Amelie, who were 2. The Macans were often seen as the perfect family. Educated, affluent, and deeply involved in their careers, while maintaining strong family bonds. Their marriage was stable, and their careers were thriving, adding to their image as an ideal family. However, this seemingly perfect life would soon be challenged in ways no one could have predicted. The Macans' lifestyle and social position would make the disappearance of Madeleine feel all the more tragic and incomprehensible to the public. Their family, once admired for its picture-perfect qualities, would become the subject of intense scrutiny and suspicion. As the investigation unfolded, the contrast between their impeccable reputation and the dark cloud that hung over them became increasingly pronounced. When the Macans planned their holiday to Praia da Luz, it was supposed to be a relaxing getaway. The town, often referred to as Little Britain because of its large British expatriate population and influx of tourists, seemed the perfect place for a family holiday. English was spoken everywhere, and the area was known for its family-friendly atmosphere. Kate Macan later admitted that she initially had reservations about the trip due to its cost, but they decided to proceed with the booking. The decision was influenced by recommendations from friends who had stayed in the Algarve region before, painting Praia da Luz as a family-friendly haven. Moreover, the Macans were not alone. They were accompanied by a group of close friends, families they had known for years. These friends, who had come to be known as the Tapas 7, were also parents of young children, making the holiday even more appealing. During the day, the adults would engage in recreational activities, such as tennis and swimming, while the children were entertained with activities and childcare services provided by the resort. In the evening, the group would gather at the resort's tapas restaurant, a convenient location just a few minutes' walk from their apartments. Each evening, the parents would leave their children sleeping in the apartment while they enjoyed dinner together, employing a system of regular checks to ensure the children were safe. 1 or 2 members of the group would periodically leave the restaurant to check on the children before returning. However, the decision to leave the apartment doors unlocked while the children slept became one of the most controversial aspects of the case. According to reports, the Macans left the doors unlocked so they could enter quietly without disturbing the children. This decision was met with criticism, especially given they were in a foreign country. Critics were quick to point out that the Macans, as highly educated professionals, had the means to afford childcare services and could have made alternative arrangements. On the evening of Madeleine's disappearance, the routine was the same as usual. Kate Macan had reportedly gone to check on the children. According to her account, she checked on the twins first, and then found Madeleine was missing. The realization sent the Macans and their friends into a frenzy. Kate's words, "They've taken her," would echo not just because of the panic in her voice, but because of the certainty embedded in them. She immediately assumed an abduction, but the question remained, why was she so certain when there was no evidence of forced entry? This moment marked the beginning of a series of reactions that would raise more questions. Adding to the complexity, Jerry Macan's remark during the airport bus ride, "I'm not here to enjoy myself," came under scrutiny. While seemingly innocuous, it was later seen as odd for a father on a family holiday. Some speculated that his words were indicative of something deeper, perhaps a sign that something was amiss long before Madeleine's disappearance. In retrospect, the Macans' seemingly idyllic life, their decision to leave their children unsupervised, and their group dynamics would all come under the microscope. The family's reputation began to crack under the weight of the investigation, and what once seemed like a simple family holiday now seemed fraught with unanswered questions. The disappearance of Madeleine Macan remains one of the most perplexing cases of the 21st century. While the facts surrounding her abduction or possible death remain elusive, one element stands out: the so-called golden window of time, the period between when Madeleine was last seen and when she was discovered missing. This crucial period is key to understanding whether it could have been possible for a death to be concealed. The timeline begins with a brief but significant sighting of Madeleine Macan at around 6:40 p.m. This is the last confirmed time anyone other than the Macans and their immediate group saw her alive. David Payne, a member of the Tapper 7, reported seeing her in the apartment as he passed by. This sighting provides the last reliable independent evidence that Madeleine was alive at that time. After this last confirmed sighting, Jerry Macan went to play tennis at 7:00 p.m., leaving Kate to manage the children. The fact that Jerry was not in the apartment during this critical window raises questions. He was at the tennis courts for about an hour, and his whereabouts were corroborated by other members of the Tapper 7, establishing a level of accountability for his actions, but also placing him away from the apartment. Around 8:30 p.m., Jerry and Kate Macan arrived at the Tapas restaurant for their evening meal. This marks the start of the window of time crucial to the various theories that have been proposed. Before heading to the restaurant, Kate had reportedly checked on the children and found Madeleine, Sean, and Amélie all in their beds. When she checked on them later, she discovered that Madeleine was missing. At this point, a frantic search began. The golden window of time, the period from when Madeleine was last seen by David Payne at 6:40 p.m. to when she was discovered missing by Kate at around 10:00 p.m., has been the focus of much speculation. Could it have been enough time to cover up a death or for someone to abduct her? This gap is key to understanding both the logical and psychological dynamics at play. On the one hand, this window of time is quite short. 90 minutes is a brief period in which to execute a complex cover-up, especially when considering the actions required. If Madeleine had died accidentally within that time frame, it would have taken significant effort to conceal the body, move it discreetly, and establish a believable cover story, all within an hour and a half. For the parents, panic and emotional turmoil would have been high, making rational action difficult. Yet, the choices the Macans made during this window would significantly shape how the case unfolded. Logically, the timeline offers limited opportunities to effectively hide a body, given the small apartment layout and the presence of nearby holidaymakers. However, some theories suggest a temporary cover-up could have occurred, such as concealing the body in a suitcase or even a refrigerator. The 90-minute time frame also poses psychological challenges. People under intense stress and grief typically exhibit erratic behavior. The decision to quickly declare that Madeleine had been taken without any immediate evidence of forced entry, suggests there may have been prior knowledge or an instinctive understanding of what had happened. Kate's statement in that moment, "They have taken her," indicates an immediate belief in abduction, which might be seen as an emotional response rooted in panic, or, potentially, a strategic declaration to cover the true circumstances. The theory that the Macan statements and actions during this golden window were rehearsed has been suggested by critics who argue that the swift adoption of the abduction narrative could have been part of a premeditated effort to mislead authorities. In terms of physical evidence, the 90 minutes also raises questions. The apartment was not immediately searched after Madeleine was discovered missing, allowing crucial evidence to be potentially altered or removed. The golden window of time continues to be one of the most contentious aspects of the Madeleine Macan case. While 90 minutes might seem a short time to conceal a death, the emotional and psychological factors at play complicate the issue. Could the Macans have covered up an accidental death during that brief period? Or was Madeleine truly abducted as they claimed? What remains undeniable is that this golden window shaped the course of the investigation and the public's perception of the Macans' involvement. The disappearance of Madeleine Macan has been surrounded by controversy, particularly regarding the reactions of her parents, Jerry and Kate Macan. As highly educated and experienced doctors, both had a deep understanding of the medical aspects of life, death, and trauma, which undoubtedly influenced their behavior. Their medical training also raised critical questions about how they might have responded. As doctors, both Jerry and Kate would have been well versed in the realities of death, decomposition, and forensic procedures. They would have understood that once a child's life has ended, resuscitation is not an option, and that an autopsy could reveal evidence that might be damaging. This knowledge of the forensic process could have had a significant psychological impact. Unlike parents without medical training, who might be driven by panic to dial emergency services, the Macans, equipped with a clear understanding of death's finality, might have felt an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Medical professionals are also acutely aware of the consequences of a death investigation, which could lead to criminal charges, loss of professional reputation, or even imprisonment. For the Macans, the fear of losing their remaining children would have been a powerful motivator. The emotional paralysis they may have experienced is an important aspect of their response. As doctors, they were trained to maintain composure, but in the case of the sudden death of their child, they may have found themselves overwhelmed by a psychological phenomenon known as freezing, a response to extreme stress in which individuals feel unable to act rationally. In the aftermath, grief and fear likely clouded their ability to make logical decisions. The urge to preserve the body may have been one of their first reactions, a way to maintain control and avoid the inevitable signs of decomposition. From a medical perspective, they understood the critical role that the timing of discovery plays in forensic investigations. The desire to preserve Madeleine's body could have been driven by a combination of practical knowledge and emotional desperation. It is possible that, faced with such a loss, they acted on a biological instinct to protect the body, a common response during times of trauma. However, their medical training would have also made them aware that hiding the body or concealing evidence would only complicate matters. The sense of powerlessness and fear could have led to actions that were less about logic and more about survival, an attempt to protect themselves, their family, and their reputations. The grief of losing a child is immeasurable, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness may have led them to make decisions that seemed out of character. In conclusion, the Macans' professional background as doctors likely influenced their actions in ways that were both rational and irrational. Their deep understanding of death would have made them aware of the grim realities they faced, but it may also have contributed to their emotional paralysis. These medical instincts, combined with their overwhelming fear of legal consequences, created a complex psychological dynamic that led to decisions that would be scrutinized and criticized for years to come. The disappearance of Madeleine Macan has captivated the public, particularly around the strange circumstances that unfolded. Among the many aspects that continue to fuel speculation, one of the most intriguing is the mystery surrounding three missing items: the fridge, Jerry's tennis bag, and Madeleine herself. These three objects, seemingly unrelated, are at the center of several theories regarding the concealment and transportation of Madeleine's body. The first item that went missing was the fridge in the Macan apartment. According to reports, Jerry Macan himself removed the fridge. The disappearance of this particular item raised immediate questions. Why would a mundane household appliance be removed at such a crucial time? From a forensic standpoint, the idea of using a fridge to store a body makes sense, especially in a scenario where the goal is to delay decomposition. As trained medical professionals, Jerry and Kate Macan would have understood the importance of keeping a body preserved for as long as possible to prevent decomposition. The fridge would have served as a means of preserving the body temporarily, until a more permanent solution could be found, or until the immediate panic had subsided. The cold environment would have slowed the natural process of decomposition, making it a practical option. This theory ties into the broader narrative of medical knowledge. Given their backgrounds, the Macans would have been acutely aware of the stages of decomposition and the need to prevent the body from being discovered in a state that could jeopardize a plausible cover story. In this sense, the disappearance of the fridge has become one of the most scrutinized elements of the case. The second object that went missing was Jerry's tennis bag. This seemingly innocuous item has become a focal point of many theories. The bag, which Jerry was known to have taken to the tennis courts earlier, was reported to have disappeared after Madeleine went missing. One hypothesis suggests that Madeleine's body was concealed in the tennis bag and transported out of the apartment in a manner that appeared normal. Tennis bags are relatively large and could conceal a small child's body. By placing the body in the bag, it is suggested that Jerry could have discreetly moved it from the apartment without drawing attention. This theory fits with the idea of acting quickly during a time of extreme emotional turmoil. Furthermore, the fact that Jerry carried the tennis bag out of the apartment after his game while still in his tennis gear provides further support for this hypothesis. On the surface, this behavior might seem entirely normal, but in the context of the situation, it becomes highly suspicious. The tennis bag was something that could easily pass as normal, yet the fact that it disappeared without explanation adds another layer of mystery. The third and most tragic element in this equation is, of course, Madeleine Macan herself. Her sudden disappearance has been heavily scrutinized, and the absence of clear evidence pointing to an abduction has led some to consider the possibility of an accident. If Madeleine's death was accidental, such as from a fall, the Macans, with their medical knowledge, would have known that the immediate aftermath was critical. Her body would have needed to be hidden quickly, and both the fridge and the tennis bag may have been used to facilitate this. The urgency of the situation could have prompted them to make decisions that seemed cold, but were actually driven by an instinct to control the situation. In many cases of child disappearance, investigators find that perpetrators have access to a hidden location. The Macans, being well-traveled professionals, may have had access to such a place. The idea of a vacant property is familiar to tourists in places like Praia da Luz, which is frequented by British expatriates. It is possible that during the initial chaos, the Macans turned to such a place of refuge to hide Madeleine's body until they had time to decide what to do next. The three missing items, the fridge, the tennis bag, and Madeleine herself are inextricably linked in some theories surrounding her disappearance. These objects, when examined together, are used to paint a picture of a calculated response to a tragic accident or possibly a premeditated cover-up. The disappearance of Madeleine Macan has generated various theories, none more extreme than the two discussed here: accidental death followed by panic disposal, and child molestation and human trafficking. These theories reflect the deep divide in public opinion. The first extreme theory suggests that Madeleine's death was an accidental tragedy, followed by a panic-driven cover-up. According to this theory, Madeleine climbed onto the couch to look out the window, lost her balance, fell behind it, and suffocated. This scenario points to a sudden, unintentional death that left the Macans in a state of extreme panic. As doctors, they would have known resuscitation was likely futile and might have acted quickly to conceal the accident, driven by fear of the consequences. One piece of evidence cited to support this is the testimony of neighbors who reported hearing a child crying late in the evening. The disappearance of the fridge and tennis bag also fits into this theory, suggesting an attempt to control the situation and buy time. However, this theory faces challenges. The Macans' delayed response in contacting authorities raises suspicions, and their immediate assumption of abduction without evidence casts doubt on the timeline. In contrast, the second extreme theory proposes something far darker: child molestation and human trafficking. This theory suggests that the Macans, or at least one of them, were complicit in allowing Madeleine to be abused in exchange for money, and that her disappearance was the result of a prearranged plan. The central argument is that the Macans deliberately drugged their children to ensure they would remain asleep during the abuse. One of the most telling pieces of evidence often cited is the statement made by Kate Macan: "They've taken her." This declaration, made moments after she discovered Madeleine was missing, is seen by some as a clue that Kate knew exactly who they were. Rather than assuming Madeleine had wandered off, her specific words suggest pre-existing knowledge. Another piece of evidence frequently cited is the Macans' possession of books about child trafficking, which were found in their apartment. Additionally, it is alleged that they used sedatives on their children, which would explain the absence of any screams or sounds of distress. However, there are several issues with this theory. One major inconsistency is the blood found in the rental car and on the apartment walls. If the Macans were involved in an organized plan, why would there be signs of violence? If Madeleine was drugged, she would not have been in a state of distress. Additionally, the theory suggests a financial motive, yet the Macans were well off and had no known need for money through such means. The lack of a clear, credible motive makes this theory particularly hard to accept. Moreover, the idea of the Macans willingly engaging in such activities contradicts their public image as devoted parents. Finally, the moving of the sofa and other forensic evidence pointing to possible violence cast further doubt on the theory. If they were involved in an elaborate scheme, why would they risk leaving traces of evidence behind? The two extreme theories represent drastically different interpretations of the evidence. While the first presents a tragic but not improbable scenario, the second ventures into the realm of deep conspiracy. Both are fueled by some details, but they each face significant logical hurdles. The presence of forensic evidence, inconsistencies in the timeline, and the lack of clear motives all complicate these theories. Ultimately, the mystery of Madeleine's disappearance remains unsolved. And while these extreme theories offer different perspectives, neither provides a definitive answer to what truly happened on that fateful night in Praia da Luz. The interviews conducted with Jerry and Kate Macan in the aftermath of Madeleine's disappearance
have been a subject of intense scrutiny, particularly regarding their behavior and the inconsistencies in their responses. These video-recorded interviews have fueled widespread speculation and have become critical pieces of evidence in the public's perception of the Macan's involvement. Two main issues have stood out: Jerry's perceived duping delight and the differences in the way he and Kate answered questions. One of the most notable elements is Jerry Macan's suspected duping delight, a psychological term used to describe a facial expression that suggests a person is secretly pleased by a deception. This behavior has been identified in several moments during Jerry's interviews, where, in response to certain questions, he exhibits signs of subtle amusement. His smile or smirk, particularly when discussing matters that should have been emotionally distressing, raise suspicions that he might not have been as grief-stricken as expected. Observers pointed out that his reaction to certain questions about his daughter's abduction seemed inappropriate. For example, when asked if he had seen anything suspicious, Jerry's response was delayed and somewhat evasive. He smiled awkwardly before answering. This body language was not in line with the expected emotional reaction to the tragic loss of his daughter, raising alarms among critics who interpreted it as indicative of a possible guilty conscience. While the concept of duping delight is not universally accepted, and some argue these could be nervous behaviors in a highly stressful situation, when coupled with his delayed responses, the behavior becomes suspect. Another point of concern is Jerry's tendency to give long-winded, convoluted responses to simple questions, often lacking directness and clarity. This is particularly stark when contrasted with Kate's more succinct, direct answers, which some interpreted as a sign of genuine grief. Jerry's more calculated responses raised suspicions about his sincerity, as he appeared to be constructing his answers carefully, possibly to control the narrative. This level of detail and evasion is often seen in individuals attempting to cover up something. They sometimes offer excessive detail to make their story appear more credible. A critical comparison can be made between the way Kate and Jerry Macan responded. While both were visibly distraught, their emotional responses and speaking styles were notably different. Kate's responses were generally quick and clear, while Jerry's were often more measured and slow. Psychologists have suggested this difference could point to different coping mechanisms, or in the context of partnership crimes where one partner might be guilty and the other innocent. It could be indicative of the psychological dynamics at play. If one parent were involved, their behavior would naturally be more calculating, while the other, assuming they were unaware, might be more emotionally distressed and forthcoming. This theory suggests that if only one parent were involved, the other may have remained unaware of the full extent of the situation. Jerry's measured, defensive tone and the possibility of duping delight could suggest he was more involved in some capacity, while Kate's emotional responses and directness could imply her grief was genuine and undiluted by guilt. The analysis of the Macan's interviews reveals a complex interplay of behavior and psychology. While no definitive conclusions can be drawn from the interviews alone, the behaviors displayed continue to be a central aspect of the case. The latest developments have brought a new prime suspect into the spotlight: Christian Bruckner, a convicted sex offender currently serving time in Germany. Authorities have been investigating his potential involvement, and the urgency has increased as Bruckner is set to be released from prison in the near future. His criminal history is deeply troubling, with several convictions for sexual offenses, and he is known to have lived in the Algarve region of Portugal, not far from where Madeleine was last seen. New evidence, including satellite images from 2007, showing areas where Bruckner frequented, has added weight to these suspicions. However, despite the increasing focus on Bruckner, many questions remain about the role of the Macans. If Bruckner is indeed involved, one might ask why the Macans behaved in such unusual ways. Their initial response, including the delayed call to the authorities and the immediate assumption of abduction, has been viewed by some as inconsistent. One theory suggests their response could be linked to a need to maintain control over the narrative. The quick declaration of abduction might have been an attempt to prevent any suspicion from falling on them. Another factor is the immense psychological toll of the situation. The stress of being thrust into the public eye and the overwhelming uncertainty might have caused them to react in ways that seem out of place. Ultimately, the renewed focus on Christian Bruckner has brought fresh attention to the Madeleine Macan case. As investigators continue to dig into his possible involvement, the Macans remain at the center of public attention. Whether their actions were motivated by guilt, fear, or shock remains an open question. The case has led to a profound division in public opinion. Some people firmly believe that Jerry and Kate Macan are innocent, while others are convinced of their guilt. The psychology behind these opposing views is complex and reflects broader societal themes such as perceptions of parental responsibility, the role of wealth and social status, and how we process grief. One of the main reasons some people believe the Macans are innocent is their perception of the couple as ideal parents, educated, professional, and devoted to their children. Both were highly respected professionals. Jerry, a consultant cardiologist, and Kate, a general practitioner, with established careers that provided them with a stable and affluent lifestyle. Their social status and wealth painted them as successful and responsible individuals, people who appeared to have everything under control. This public image of the Macans as a model family reinforced the idea that they could not have been involved in any wrongdoing, especially something as heinous as the disappearance of their own child. The Macans' financial stability and social position also played a significant role in how some people viewed their innocence. The couple's background in the medical field led some to believe that they were too professional and morally upstanding to be involved in any criminal activity. Their intelligence and wealth made them appear beyond reproach. In many cases, society tends to trust those who hold prestigious careers, assuming that their positions of authority come with a certain level of integrity. This bias toward trusting the perfect family dynamic played a large role in the public's initial sympathy for the Macans. Moreover, their behavior during the investigation was often interpreted as a sign of genuine grief. The Macans' public pleas for help and their constant media appearances to raise awareness of Madeleine's disappearance could have reinforced their innocence in the eyes of many. People saw their desperation and emotional distress as evidence of parents who were simply trying to find their missing child. On the other side of the spectrum, many people are convinced that the Macans were involved in Madeleine's disappearance, citing suspicious behavior and parental neglect as the key reasons for their belief. Their actions in the aftermath raised red flags for many observers. For instance, the decision to leave 3 young children alone in an apartment while they dined at a nearby restaurant was seen as highly irresponsible and negligent. Critics argued that such behavior was not just careless, but potentially criminal, given the risks involved. The lack of immediate action by the Macans, particularly the delay in contacting authorities, also contributed to suspicions. Some perceived their quick assumption of abduction as an attempt to deflect suspicion from themselves. Instead of exploring other possibilities, the Macans were quick to adopt a narrative of abduction, which many felt was an attempt to control the investigation. Additionally, Jerry Macan's behavior during interviews added to the belief in his guilt. Critics pointed out that he seemed to display a type of duping delight, the unconscious enjoyment a person might display while deceiving others.
Observers noted moments when he appeared to smile or display inappropriate facial expressions for the gravity of the situation. This behavior, combined with his long-winded, evasive answers, led some to suspect that he was hiding something. The suspicion was further compounded by the lack of clarity around the timeline and the discrepancies in their version of the night's events. The fact that Madeleine was left alone for a significant period raised doubts about their ability to protect their children, as parents are typically expected to provide constant supervision. Another critical factor influencing public opinion is the personal experience of those judging them. For many parents, the idea of leaving their child unsupervised is unimaginable. The basic instinct to protect their children runs so deeply that the idea of neglecting that duty seems unfathomable. The notion of leaving children alone in a foreign country without professional childcare in a rented apartment is almost impossible for some to grasp. This strong emotional reaction is often tied to the idea that a parent's duty is to protect their child at all costs, and the Macan's behavior seems to violate that instinct. Some parents in particular cannot fathom the idea of hiding the death of their child even if it were accidental. The idea that the Macans might have hidden Madeleine's body seems so foreign that they are more likely to believe in a scenario of abduction rather than a cover-up. The case of the Macans reveals the deep complexities of human psychology and public opinion. Some are inclined to believe in their innocence largely because of their public image as the ideal family, while others cannot overlook the perceived signs of negligence and inconsistency. The clash between these two opposing viewpoints stems from personal experiences with parenting and an inability to understand the actions taken by the Macans. The case continues to spark strong emotional responses because it challenges deeply held beliefs about parenting and responsibility. The disappearance of Madeleine Macan has left the world with a series of unanswered questions. One of the first and most critical is, who exactly were they? When Kate Macan cried out, "They've taken her," was she referring to an abductor, or could there be a deeper explanation? The use of the word "they" implies knowledge, yet no clear evidence has emerged to identify who they could be. Another key question is whether the disappearance was an accident or a premeditated plot. Was it an unfortunate tragedy that led to panic and poor decisions, or was there a more sinister conspiracy at play? Additionally, there remains the question of whether anyone other than the Macans was involved. Was there someone else at the scene that night, or a third party with knowledge of what happened? As the years pass, these questions remain largely unanswered, and the mystery of what happened to Madeleine Macan continues to haunt both her family and the public. Was this a tragic accident, a chilling conspiracy, or something even more sinister? Perhaps we will never truly know. The truth may be buried forever, leaving behind a series of unanswered questions that will continue to provoke debate for years to come. As this case approaches 2 decades without resolution, the questions it forces upon us become more personal. How does the story of a child who vanished from a holiday apartment in a world we believe to be safe and connected affect your own sense of security? When faced with conflicting narratives and the profound absence of truth, where do you place your trust and why? As public memory fades and headlines move on, what is our role in keeping Madeleine's name alive? Not as a symbol of tragedy, but as a reminder of the enduring search for answers and the quiet hope for justice that her family, and so many others, still hold. The investigation continues, but perhaps the greater question is what we, the observers, choose to carry forward from this unresolved story. Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these arguments and theories? Does it give you a different perspective on the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest notifications.